Well, welcome back to Legacy on Purpose. My name is Kyle Sanders. I'm the host of this podcast and the founder of Legacy Consultants Group in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm so thankful that you've chosen to take some time out of your day to spend it with us. If you're out for a run right now, hopefully these are fast, easy miles for you. I'm an ultra marathon runner, so fast feet, open eyes, full heart, my friends. If I'm in your ears on your commute to work, to the gym, thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever you're listening to us in this moment, thank you for being part of our community. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. We are at Legacy on Purpose. I do respond to all DMs and any feedback, any thoughts, any questions you have to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Just want to say thank you to all of you who have taken a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just truly meaningful to me. I cannot say thank you enough. If our next guest connects with you, certainly make sure to shoot them a DM. Let them know what you think of their wisdom. I am so grateful for these guests who take time out of their day to share their story with you and with me. Truly, truly meaningful. And our next guest is one, if you haven't heard his story, it is one of great triumph, great overcoming, great impact. And I use the word overcoming very delicately to our disabled community. When I say overcoming, let me speak to that in a different way that is clear. What he overcame is a different thing. Dean Furness, while on his farm in Iowa, had a hail bale fall off of the front end of a tractor and land on him and rendered him needing the use of a wheelchair. And what he overcame was a mindset. Overcame was a belief system that he had carried before his disability, that when he reassessed and digged into what he was taught by coaches, by leaders, by individuals in his life, before that moment, gave him the strength and the ability and the tools and the resources to come to a different perspective on life. So his TED Talk, to overcome challenges, stop comparing yourself to others, has garnered over 600,000 views. I'd encourage you to watch it. That's what he overcame. He overcame the tendency to compare, which has given him the opportunity to become an extraordinary in-chair wheelchair athlete and a true competitor at the marathon distance, including a finisher of the Boston Marathon and a qualifier and finisher of the Boston Marathon, which is an extraordinarily difficult race to even get into. So Dean shares his wisdom and his perspective on how we can stop comparing ourselves to become the most authentic, impactful versions of ourselves. He shares some real wisdom in terms of the areas of his life he's looking to still grow in and improve, where he feels his relationship equity can still grow in. One of the most amazing conversations I've had, really getting some great wisdom here. So I can't wait for you to hear this one. Dean's a wonderful guy. I really encourage you to go out watching the TED Talk after you hear this. Send him a message. He'd love to hear from you. So without any further ado, I present you the one and only, the incredible flying athlete, unbelievable, Dean Furness. Well, Dean, thank you so much for being with me today. This opportunity to connect, to have conversation, to learn from your journey, your wisdom, and I've been so excited to connect with you. And one of the things I just want to recognize you before we get going is that we all learn these little bits of wisdom along life. We learn ways to live, the way to operate, the way to connect with others. But so often people don't share that wisdom. They keep it to themselves and they don't put themselves out there. And so I just want to recognize you before we get going in sharing your wisdom and this truth to understand of really how to measure ourselves in a healthy way, how to evaluate our goals and the way we're living, and such a powerful piece of wisdom. So thank you so much for putting that out there. And I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It should be fun.
I don't traditionally do this, but I kind of give, at the beginning of this, I gave a little intro to the accident that you had with the bale hay and what that impact had in your life physically. But one of the things I'm really curious for you is you've overcome some, really challenging circumstance, something that you didn't invite upon yourself. Like that accident was not on your Outlook calendar. That was not planned, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But you've persevered through that and you come to this new place of understanding. And I'm curious, I call it a new one. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious as you reflect on that journey, okay, from somebody who did not need a wheelchair to somebody who uses a wheelchair as a tool and where you are today, as you think about that journey and you think about pre and post, right? If I can kind of take you into that space for a moment, do you think about or have you ever thought about what was it about myself? What values, what core principles, what foundational beliefs allowed me to transition through that in the way that I did, that had I not had those pieces, maybe I would have approached that situation differently?
Yeah, it's almost crazy to think, right? So you kind of started off with the idea. It didn't ask me for permission, right? Say, hey, what if we did this to you? I'm like, I think that's okay. You don't get asked that stuff, right? It just happens in the moment. And the the interesting thing is, over time, I learned that so many of the things that were a part of who I was that had been buried, honestly, for quite a while, came to the forefront. So all of the mentoring, coaching, the positive people in my life, my family, my parents, you get told stuff growing up, you get guided growing up, and they hope you make the right decision. But it's amazing how many of those foundational pieces are there when you need to call on them. And the question is, can you bring those out? So, a lot of my background might have been through athletics. It might have been even being in the band, right? Friendships and all those sorts of things. The ability to compete and to draw on some of those experiences really started to come together. But yeah, it's interesting how quick it happened for me from a all right, it happened. Now what? And what's next? I had some people nudging me along the way, obviously. It was interesting looking back in that while I was in the midst of the trauma, before ambulance arrived, before helicopter arrived, you have time to talk, right? Because you really don't know what's going on or what tomorrow is going to be or if he's even going to be there. And
Mm.
when when help arrived, being that I live in a small community, it was interesting that that help were my friends.
Oh man.
The volunteer EMT, the volunteer fire, those are my buddies, right? And to know and hear their voices while they were helping me was really interesting. It's like, all right, I'm cool. My friends are here. I'm going to be all right. And certainly the transition happened in some of those things, but it's crazy how what becomes a normal day for me is really based on all of the things that have been embedded in us. We've always been a hardworking family, even as kids. It wasn't about getting paid to do chores. It was you're going to do chores. Nowadays kids think they need paid for everything, right? But we did chores because it was responsibility for us to do, and our parents expected that. And I think that work hard, play hard mentality really helped transition quite a bit.
So beyond the work ethic, which I agree with you, like I grew up in a small community. My parents had their own business. Like
Mhm.
there was the list of things you needed to do on Saturday before you went to go do anything on the refrigerator.
Right.
Right. It was just that's what you had to do. And you didn't want to cross my mother if you didn't do them, right?
Yeah.
So she didn't need to call my dad for backup. She had it well handled with two boys. So beyond the hard work, that work ethic, like you said, you anchored to some wisdom that people had shared with you through
Yeah.
your life. Like, was there anything as you think about that moment, and I imagine you've had many since then, was there anything that you think of specifically that was a more powerful tool for you
Yeah.
or a belief system that you held potentially that helped you move forward from that pretty impactful moment?
One of the huge influences that doesn't really come out in some of the things that have the talk and stuff that we've given online. I was lucky enough to have a college football coach that was 65 years old. He had forgotten about more football than I would ever see at that time. I played for a small Division 3 NCAA school, right? So it's non-scholarship. If you love the game, you show up and play. And he instilled some things immediately with the camaraderie, the culture, and all those things that come to play. And it's things that you don't really think about at the time, but nowadays I can call on any one of those 100 teammates, and it's like we've never missed a beat in 25 years. But there are specific things that he would call out in practice or at the end of practice, little talks about life as opposed to football. and we were good. We did quite well every Saturday. But the the end of practice talks like telling you it's okay to have a bad play. It's okay if you have one. What's not okay is not recognizing that and not evaluating it and then doing something about it. And you think about some of the things that I try to go through. I kind of correlated that to meaning it's okay to have a bad day. And
Mm.
and the thing is, it's you're not a failure. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just a bad day. And if you can compartmentalize that and figure that stuff out, you can get past it so much quicker. But it really comes down to, and I think his message was, do you have the guts to evaluate yourself? Not beat yourself up, but just ask the question, was it better than yesterday or not? And if it wasn't, that's cool. You got tomorrow to think about and to make that happen. That translated in today's world to me in terms of how quick can I evolve or move on from something that might not be going the way that I want it to go. I work in an IT organization. We often have meetings that can get contentious as we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And it's never a personal attack on anybody, but we get anxious with each other. And you could let that ruin things, and you could take it all the way home to dinner time with your family, which isn't fair to them, or you can just wipe it clean and move on. And I think a big part of the success we had on the football field was based on those things. And it translates today in that I help coach our high school girls basketball team. My daughter's on the team. I'm lucky to have an opportunity to be with her at practice. But basketball moves so fast. You don't have time to roll your eyes at the referee. You don't have time to react. The ball's gone at the other end of the court. And so we really focus on the girls understanding that the details that they put into practice are not about basketball. It's about that job that you're going to interview for, the promotion you're going to be up for. And oh, by the way, let's play some basketball, right?
Yeah.
And I think had I not had that college coach and some of those teachings and those friends I still have and how that's transitioned into hopefully what I'm doing to help our girls out, it'd be a different situation.
Yeah, that's really powerful. There's some really beautiful wisdom in that. And I think one of the things that, from many of us is that we, still worrying about the last play. Like I think about, pitchers, for example, or quarterbacks, right? Those two
Yeah.
positions, right? Is when the pitcher gives up the home run ball, when the quarterback throws the interception,
Mm-hmm.
pick six specifically, right?
Yeah.
So the next offensive play, other than the field goal kick, right? But like
Sure.
the real next offensive play is you got to pick the pigskin up again,
Yeah.
or you got to take that ball and put it back in your mitt
Right.
and put that home run, put that pick six out of your mind and go again.
Yeah.
And, and if you don't, you're probably going to throw another pick six. Or you're probably going to give up another home run
Yeah.
if you don't leave that bad play behind you. And, I've got an 8, a 6, a 2-year-old, and our fourth one on the way. And I was talking to my daughter who plays softball. Here's my only expectation for you. This is a team sport. You can't control whether you win the game or lose the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 2 things you can control when you're on the field. She's like, "What's that, Dad?" I was like, "Do you do your absolute best
Mm-hmm.
every play? Do you stay in the game? Do you stay focused? Do you do your best? Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And do you have fun? Do you have a positive attitude?" And one of her games, she fielded the ball at third. She was playing third base, flubs it, picks it up, runner's running, and she dives and tags this runner out.
Nice.
As a second grader, right? She
Yeah.
just dives. The coach is going crazy.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
players are going crazy. And we got done. And I didn't congratulate her for the out. That was pretty epic.
Yeah.
I congratulated her because I knew that was 100% effort.
Yeah.
That was 100% effort moment. And so what I hear you saying is that a big piece for you is something very similar. Is that one, you've always been 100% guy.
Yeah.
And 2, that in your life, you've recognized that we're all going to have bad days. We're all going to have bad plays,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's the home run ball, the pick six, whatever sports analogy you want to use. But you got to put it out of your mind and take that next step forward.
And there's so many things. I spent my weekend with my 17-year-old playing softball. She may not agree. I think it's her best sport. It's not her favorite. But shoot, this weekend, 5 for 9, 4 doubles, 6 RBI. I mean, shoot, she played really well, right? But
Yeah,
she was upset because she said I didn't hit the ball where I wanted to. Like, what do you mean? It hit the fence, and but there's something about the bad day thing I think is really interesting, and you see it with the young kids as well. and maybe all of us do. I know when the alarm goes off some days, if it's going to be a rough day, right? I can tell my legs are kind of buzzing, which is we can get into that if you wish, but I can just tell there's something about the day. It's kind of like when your parents would say, "Wow, the weather's changing, my body hurts." I never believed that until now I'm older, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, my body hurts today." So I have a choice: do I dig in and dig my heels in and fight it all day, or do I just say, it's going to be what it is? And I think in that latter example, by the time noon comes, I've kind of forgotten about it. I haven't tried to grind through it and gnash my teeth. It's just like I assume it and I embrace it and say, you know what, today is going to be one of those days. So let's just get through that, right? And I think what's interesting too about it all is as we try to project that and set that example, having a player, a kid, family member understand the smile part of it, the work hard part of it. Growing up, we are taught and conditioned to try to be the best. You need to make the team. You need to get this. You need to do that. And it's amazing how little time is spent on demanding them to be a good person or to do it
Mm.
right. There's so much competition about if you don't make the team, where's that competition of being the best person you can be aside of that? And that's where the hypocritical nature of this comes in for me is like, we can talk as if I've got it figured out. There's so many things that I still am trying to figure out, right? I mean, all of us. Nobody has it figured out. It might look like I am achieving something in a wheelchair that is a normal day for me, but there's so many other things that have to still be figured out.
I think we all, so first and foremost, thank you for that. Cause I think hearing from somebody who's, Boston Marathon qualifying, wheelchair athlete, TEDx speaking, individual, like all these things that you've achieved, it's very easy to go, well, Dean's got this thing called life under control, right? And I love when people are extraordinarily transparent to say, look, like I'm still growing. I'm not there.
Mhm.
I've got some wisdom in these specific areas, but I'm learning from other people in these areas of my life. Because there couldn't be anything more truer than that in all of it is that we are all growing some way.
Mhm.
And if you aren't,
Yeah,
you're like, I've got it all figured out.
yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
That whole next comment, with the kids, we tell them there's always something next, and you have to keep moving forward with that.
This is a key thing, and it leads into your TEDx talk is that we so often it's like, well, I didn't do what this person did. So I was a marathon runner and I wanted to qualify for Boston. That was a really, really important goal for me.
Mhm.
And I got my marathon time down to a 3:22. And based on my age group, I needed to hit a 3:10. I know what I needed to do to get to
That's flying.
3:22. What?
That's flying.
Yeah, I was moving, but I knew what I needed to do and what I had to put my body through to get down to a 3:22 and to shave another 12 minutes off my time. I didn't know how to. I did what I had available to me. I didn't know how to. But it was always like I had this terrible, terrible perspective on my marathon running because I looked at it as though I had failed because it was all about hitting this arbitrary time that
Yeah,
Boston declares that based upon how old I am,
yeah,
this is what it means to be a so
yeah.
share with me for you, like as you've gone through this journey of how you measure Dean.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about the understanding for those who haven't seen the TED Talk, and we'll link to it in the show notes so people make sure they do, because it's incredible. Talk to me a little bit about that understanding and how has that helped you achieve some of the things you have?
Yeah, there's some interesting things that again don't come out in the talk. In that I'm coming up in December. Will be 10 years in a wheelchair, which first of all is mind blowing that it's gone that fast. But I came home in 2012 in February, and in May I attended a track and field Paralympic camp, if you will, or it wasn't even really a camp. It was more of an exhibition where we could go to the track and meet people and understand. I was introduced to racing that day, and it wasn't until 4 years later that I finally said, "Hey, maybe I should get into this racing thing." And I'm kicking myself for this time that I could have been, engaged in racing a lot better. And I think the thing that's interesting when it finally came about, I have such a strong support group, friends, community around me that I never joined the wheelchair basketball team. I never joined the adaptive sports teams locally and such because I had so much other stuff I was doing. They had me full of helping coach this and help the kids with that I didn't have time, nor did I feel that I was missing a camaraderie ship or whatever like that. And so when the racing came around, it was really my physical therapist. I'll blame her for the pain that no, seriously, I call her the captain of my team. She's in charge of what we're doing. She's just wonderful. And she was a runner and she convinced me to get after it. And she knew there was nobody for me to do anything to compare with. And it was really a matter of her just simply saying, track everything. I use Strava heavily. And so track everything, look back and just decide how you feel and take your time with that. And it wasn't until middle of the summer in 2016 where I got to thinking that maybe there's more to this. I'm really having a good time. But if I really want to get into this racing, how would I do that? And was lucky enough to have some folks respond to an email and get me started. And when you're doing that, first of all, when you look at a Paralympian, it's different than an Olympian. And there's something about that, meaning that when you think Olympian, you're thinking Usain Bolt, you're thinking a 20-year-old incredible athlete of some sort, right? The Paralympian, it's interesting how the wheelchair is a leveling factor. I mean, there are many Paralympians that are in their 30s, if not older. There are people that are 60 years old and so much faster than I am on a chair. And that it's a leveling factor a little bit, right? And I'm by no means that caliber of an athlete, but I've been in the room with them and they will tell me hello, which I find nice, right? They recognize that I exist, but they're just everyday people and they're in a wheelchair as well. And it's interesting how that coach that helped me out continued to simply tell me to focus on me and work on my stroke and work on my plan and so on. And he would send me workout plans. And it's interesting, the workout plans have to deal with percentages of your ability, not you need to do this mileage in this time. And so everything is a percent of your max speed. So if my max speed is X, you're going to do this workout at 70% of that for 10 minutes. And so be it where your distance is. Your goal is to hold that percentage and so on. And so every workout and every bit of guidance I received from them folks was focused on what I was able to do as opposed to looking at others that are there.
So how is that translated? Because I want to, because yeah. I don't want to go past that wisdom for a minute.
Sure.
Like that's incredible. And for those who aren't athletes, who aren't training at that level, is percentage of max threshold and heart rate training, heart rate zone training. But there's a powerful concept in that. Yeah. How is that understanding of percentage of your best, percentage of your max, like how is that translated in other areas of your life?
Yeah, and maybe just give more background to solidify it, right? So I'm going to have really two kinds of workouts. I'm either going to be out on a trail or a city street or something on pavement, or I'm going to be on my roller, which is essentially like a treadmill in the basement. And the roller is an easier way to understand the workout. We'll do a warm up and then you will have a 30-second time window after that warm up where you'll just go as fast as you possibly can. And you want to do this every day. And if your max speed ends up being 15 miles an hour, you then take a rest and you will calculate your percentages. So today's workout is going to be an 80%, then a 70, then a 60. You'll quickly jot down and say, all right, I need to hold 80% at whatever that is, a 15 mile an hour, and so on. And then the next day, guess what? You're back. And the next day you do another max speed effort. And over time, hopefully that max speed effort starts to get stronger and better, right? And I think it really comes down to understanding what your average is. And this goes straight to the talk, right? If you're constantly testing what your max speed effort is, you're going to slowly see that you're going to rise higher and higher. And that becomes normal, right? I mean, that's what's interesting is a normal day for me, an average day for me, somebody might say, wow, how are you able to accomplish that? I'm like, well, I've been doing that average day for a really long time. It's not, in my case, it's not inspirational or motivational. It's just my day. And through the years of doing that, it gets to be commonplace that way. So if you think about racing, you think about work performance and what you just challenge yourself every day to do. cooking. I mean, making a meal for your family, doing your chores, and there's always ways that you can think about, what do I normally do? How could I get that a little bit better? And then hopefully that better becomes the norm, and then you get a little bit better from there.
I think that's such an interesting way to live. And I think it's one of those things where people often say, well, how can I make my life better? How can I grow? How can I be, better tomorrow? And the reality is that's a formula. Like
Yeah.
if you aren't paying attention to what Dean just said, let me just paraphrase that, and Dean, and guide me if I don't paraphrase this properly. But like the key formula here is that what Dean's doing is you fail every day. When you're doing that training, you take yourself to max effort. Another way to say is failure. And then you operate at 80%, 70%, 60% of complete and total absolute all out failure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then from there, because you're willing to fail, you're willing to go all the way in, then your ability to go further, that max effort grows at the 80 to 70 and 60 inch up, because you're willing to go further, harder, deeper. It's a whole different formula. It's a whole different experience if that max effort is not on the front end of that.
Right.
And so I thought that was such a powerful component of that. I wanted to point it out.
And failure is an interesting thought there too, in that almost always I will look back an hour later and say, well, that wasn't so bad, and I was actually speaking with one of my friends who's going to be at the Paralympic trials trying to make Team USA here in a couple of months, right? Really good friend. She was my daughter's confirmation sponsor, in fact, right? And we talk almost every day. I'm old enough to be her dad, but she will put up with my questions about racing, and she'll ask me about career. And so we share some wisdom there. And she's constantly just telling me, don't be so down. Look back 2 years at what you tracked, and thankfully the apps let us do that. And she's right. 2 years ago, I was struggling to get to a speed that right now I just sit down and that's what we go at. It's just a normal thing. And it's so easy to lose sight of that. It's so easy to lose track of the challenges you'd put yourself through that are now just regular day. Even wheelchair, right? Getting out of bed, taking a shower, getting clothes on, having the balance to not fall over. All those things were a challenge the first week. And after a while, it's like, no big deal. In fact, I used to count to 3 before I would launch into my chair. I'd be on the bed, like 1, 2, and then I'd go. Like now I'm beside a scale, right? And it's where I'd have to psych myself up to get ready to do this miniature gymnastics move to get into a wheelchair. And nowadays it's just a regular thing. And I think it's with anything else in life, right? You just roll into things that become commonplace. If it's new, you prep, right? I mean, you do some work. But if it's not, just go with it.
Yeah, and I think most of us, like we go through windows where getting out of bed is an heroic move, right? Like imagine you still have some days where you do the 1, 2, 3.
Oh yeah.
Right? Chair or not, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's this gift that we can give ourselves to recognize you build a tool, right? Yours is counting to 3 to deal with something that was new to your life, that was something you physically and mentally and emotionally needed to adjust to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, most days you don't need that, but I suspect sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Like all of us do.
Yeah. And I don't know what you went through when you were doing more of your running before the boot. Counting is a big deal in the racing chair, specifically on the roller. 100 strokes a minute is pretty commonplace. And it doesn't seem like a lot for the first minute, but when you need to go 3 or 4 minutes that way, I am constantly counting in my head, trying to psych myself up to realize there's only 80 left, there's only 60 left, there's only 40 left before I can jog, if you will, right?
Yes.
And that can be anything. It can be just an extended jog versus whatever. And I think, as you're getting through something difficult in life, you're always thinking about when is it going to end. But if you can find a way to not be a victim in that and actually try to excel and push all the way to the end, it makes all the difference as well.
So I injured the foot doing a 50-mile ultra marathon and training for a 50-miler. So I'm an advocate for doing hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Just we all have a different version of what hard means. So for me, I built my endurance to a place where the unknown, the scary, and the hard was 50. That could be a 10K for somebody else. And for me, one of the things that I learned is that you can't run mile 50 until you run mile 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so to learn to be very, very present in the mile you're running,
yeah.
I think so much of us spend an enormous amount of time either in the past or the future,
Hmm.
whatever that is. We each have days, tendencies, you know, some of us are wired one direction or the other more likely than others. But I learned once I went beyond the 26.2, like how dangerous that was. And I was lucky to have heard from another ultra marathon runner, like, be where your feet are, be in the mile.
Hmm.
And I applied that. And it's amazing how impactful that's been in relationships, in business, and life in general, of just being okay, not having your mind someplace else. And counting's a way to do that. Like my first 50K, which is 31 miles,
Hmm.
it got ugly. It got ugly. And I mean, I just don't know another way to describe that. It was ugly. It was messy. Mentally, I was toast. And so I started just counting my steps. Curious how long I could just count my steps and be only counting my steps to bring myself back into the moment. So
Right.
when you do that counting of the strokes, do you find that to be a very centering process as well?
It,
Helps you keep focused in the moment?
it does, and it centers my breathing on top of it. Your breathing cadence, your running cadence, all those things apply, and of course the undulations of the road, the rises and the falls play as well. Being in the moment's interesting in that 2 years ago was my first and only Boston because we didn't have it last year. The first 17-ish miles of that race are screaming. I mean, we're on a downhill plane for a lot of that race, and people would ask how was it, and I just my mind is it was quick. It was the first over half the race was gone so fast that I didn't really even realize where I was. We're just head down pushing. Of course, then you get hit in the face pretty hard in that late part of the race with the hills, right? And it tells you you're human again. But there's so many races that way that we're so intent on just going as fast as we can. And with us in the racing chair, we're looking down at the pavement or up in front a little bit, right? But there's a lot of times you're just looking down and getting through it. And that's something I have to work more with. But that's a key part of it. And one of the challenges I have is in the training that I do, it seems that I end up on the same trails and the same paths and the same roads, and it gets monotonous, and I have to find a way to challenge myself. And one way is to do that counting to try to get the pace faster and some of those things. I won't go out on a county road or highway in my chair just for fear of getting run off the road. I just won't do it. So I have a lot of great places here in the area where I can be safe, but after a while you use them up. And so the monotony of it, the challenging yourself, I totally understand that.
They have a half marathon. It's the way you've run
Yeah.
the ours here,
Yeah.
called the Indy Mini,
Mm-hmm.
right? Runs around the Indianapolis 500 Motor
Sure.
Speedway.
Yeah.
I've ran it multiple times, as I understand you have well.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they still do this because it's been a number of years since I've ran that race, but you run by the Indianapolis Zoo, and they used to bring an elephant out.
Oh no, I haven't been there with the elephant.
Yeah, nor have I, because I never noticed it. Someone goes, "Hey, did you see the elephant?" I'm like, what are you talking about? There was an elephant at the zoo. I'm like, they had an elephant out? It's just so tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And I have the ability to look left to right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has changed dramatically in my running is, so I do a lot of zone 2 heart rate training, so way slower than what I can run to build that endurance, and is the ability to take in
Mm-hmm.
what you're experiencing, to take in the journey. As you've gone through this journey of being the athlete you are, like how has that helped you in other areas? Maybe connections with your wife, with your kids, with your colleagues. Like,
Yeah.
how has this racing helped you in relationships with the people you love or the people you work with?
I think from family and friends and all that stuff, I have to remember that some of them aren't as driven as I am, and some of them aren't as interested in racing like I am. And so I have to talk about other things, even though as much as I want to talk about the racing part of it. But I also think that I have to be very aware of how much they support me without me even knowing it. And so I'll have a group of friends that will ride along with me. They're in bicycles. I make fun of them when they're done because they get off their bike like they're sore, because they're old men like me. And, we have a good time, and we go share a drink afterwards. And, the fact that they just come out, it's just, something I have to be very aware of, that they have invested time in me. And granted, they're there because they want to be there. But I think without me suggesting that we go for a ride, I don't know if they would go do it. And so it's something that I really have to be aware of that people see what I'm doing, but there are so many people involved that have a part in that. And I have to just be very aware of those things. And then I think the second part is there are people that have helped me years ago in ways that I don't even know, right? They may have donated, they may have spent a half hour of time. I just have to be really careful that I understand that something that might be going on right now that might not look right, that they've had my back all along, if that makes sense. And so I have to be really careful that I don't dismiss an effort or a comment or things that people have made today or maybe haven't made. It's weird. When I was leaving, I was at Craig Hospital in Denver for my rehabilitation. I started in Des Moines for about 4 weeks and went out to Denver for 6 weeks. And there was a gentleman that was on the board of the hospital there. It's a spinal cord and brain injury rehab hospital. So there's 30 or 40 of us in wheelchairs learning how to live again. The gentleman on the board of the hospital happened to be on the Paralympic rugby team. And I asked him, I said, they're sending me home next week. What am I not ready for? And he said, you're going to find that there are friends that you have, not did have, but you still have, that are going to fade away from you. And they're still friends. They're going to fade away because they just don't know how to handle seeing you going through what you're going through. And then you're going to have other people in your life that have always been there that are going to elevate and be at the forefront and push you. And you never knew that they've been there the whole time. And it's not that you're losing friends or gaining friends, it's just the roles changed with some of that. And it's spot on. I've had folks that for 6 months, they're over, help them out, and now we've kind of fell right back into they're good friends, but we don't see them as often as we used to. And the investment that folks have made that way, it's just been interesting to learn that they're still friends, just that they may not be in the forefront. And a lot of the stuff is that, they're sitting back and seeing what I'm able to accomplish without them having to be involved every day. You ask about, how has it impacted life and stuff. I'm doing a lot of what I'm doing partially because I feel like I owe it to all of them still for everything they've done for me, to show them, look what you did for me, and me competing and finishing in these things is a testament to the support that they've given me. And if it makes them excited about our community and look at this guy and he's a friend of mine, I'm all in for that. And unfortunately, my family probably doesn't get the payback as much as I should give them. You know what I mean? I think they're certainly proud. My daughter, if I need help, she's there in an instant, even if I've just grounded her. And she gets it, that there's a difference between when she's in trouble, she can't really be angry at me. If I'm needing help, she's there.
You don't train at the level you train at the distances I ran at. I ran 1,050 miles last year, right? Yeah. And I've got 3 kids and a wife and a bit, my wife's homeschooling kids because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'm out like taking 4 and 5 hours to go run, right? Mm-hmm. And the 50 miler was a virtual, ended up being self-supported because of the pandemic. And she was there cheering me on the whole time.
Yeah.
The whole time. And that meant the world to me. It still does, right? She's my biggest cheerleader.
My wife was watching online. She didn't go to Boston with me a couple years ago. She's been to Chicago, and Chicago was fun because you go up and back the street so many times that they get a chance to see you in the race multiple times.
Yeah, Boston's super different.
Yeah, it's point to point, right? And she was watching online from home, and like I said, the first 17, 18 miles, she's like, oh my gosh, he's ahead of his pace. But then online, going up Heartbreak Hill or, whatever they are, my little icon just stopped, right? And she started texting my daughter saying, what happened? I should have been out there. Something's wrong or whatever. It's like, no, it's just a really big hill. And you go from like 18 miles an hour.
Really big hill.
Yeah, 18 miles an hour downhill to 2 miles an hour up. So funny story, that hill was so hard on me that to start the hill, people were cheering out my number, come on, go 36, go whatever, right? A couple of folks were walking up the hill beside me, took the time to get the app out to punch in my number and then find my name. And all of a sudden I became Dean and they're cheering for me by name. I was going that slow up the hill. So they had time to look it up. And my wife's like, oh, I thought something was wrong. Like, no, just there was something wrong, but it was a hill, you know.
Oh, yeah. I was ahead of goal, so I wanted to break 3 hours and 30 minutes in Boston. I think I did 3:38, 3:39, so I was close, but didn't get there. And it was on the downhill, like such a different thing for in-chair and non-in-chair athletes. Like the downhill is just like after all the hills in Newton,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start going downhill and it just starts destroying. So it's just
Sure.
it's interesting to hear you talk about what your hard for that race is, having ran it, and what my hard of the race is as a non-in-chair athlete. It's a hard course.
It's interesting. A lot of the workouts we do focus on going with the wind or going down a hill, meaning that, you know, we can grind up a hill and go slow and you can grind into the wind, but can your hands move faster than they have moved before? And by going down a hill, can you catch that ring? Can you catch that ring? And there's a point where so many miles an hour where your hand just can't keep up. And so you just have to coast or glide down the hill. So in my case, I think, you know, once I hit a 22 mile an hour, I can't move my hand any faster to do it. So we will practice that because you don't get an opportunity to practice speed. You can always practice the weight training side of it into the wind, right? But it's kind of crazy how it's flipped from what you would think. You know, why would you struggle to go into the wind? Well, I'm going to get through that part of the race. Question is, can I go faster on the downs as well?
Fascinating. Fascinating. That takes a heck of a lot of courage. I like you hit a bump. Like what? Tell me about this because I'm never raced in a chair.
20,
Like
22 is slow.
really?
Oh yeah. So best in the
What
world.
happens to the chair if you catch a bump or something? Like what? Like
I don't know. I have never done. No. You know, best in the world, right? In a normal scenario, let me put it this way: best in the world, a wheelchair will beat a runner at 800 meters and beyond. A quarter of a mile, the runner's probably going to win, but once you get to a half mile on a track, the best wheelchairs are going to beat a minute and a half at an 800 meters on a track. When you get out to the road racing, my goal right now is to average 15 miles an hour. So that's an hour 45 marathon.
no marathoners touching that ever.
Well, no, right? They're gonna aim for, you know, Kip and those guys are going for 2 hours, right? But
Right.
it may sound crazy, right? But understand the wheels. I can literally push 3 or 4 times and coast for 100 meters, where you have to keep running, right? So there's a point to where some of that plays out. So you can't do the comparison, but to make the comparison happen, right? Best in the world are going to go an hour and 25 minutes. And so I'm 20 minutes slower across the marathon, right? They're clipping at that 18 to 20 mile an hour average, not just downhill. And that's crazy. So you think about them, the 15 mile an hour for me is a 4 minute mile on average throughout. For them, they're in that 3:15 average per mile. But that comes down to, like, if I compare myself to them, why would I even start? And that's where
Exactly.
it comes
Exactly.
whatever. But going down a hill, you know, we wear a helmet. I think I've,
Good move. Good move.
yeah, I think I've capped out around 38 going down a hill once.
Jeez.
It was in a 20K and we were coming off a reservoir dam and
Mm.
just tuck and go, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, luckily haven't had any issues there. So
Yeah, yeah. That's insane. You had a friend ask me, like, hey, you're gonna try to keep up with the Kenyans? I'm like, I would need a bicycle. Are you kidding me? Like, I can't run, like, I'd blow up my entire race if I tried to keep up with them for a mile. So
well, that's where
um,
I'm at, right? So off the start, we can draft each other just like NASCAR, and it's amazing what that does for helping, right?
you
Um,
do a little bumping, do a little bump, Rob,
Actually,
or
the front wheel absolutely does bump the person in front of you often. But if off the start, if you don't get into one of those groups, you're never going to catch them. And so from that start, that first 100 meters is crucial to try to keep up and get after it. And if you're on your own, then, you know, you're back to training just like at home. At least for
and
me,
that's a long distance then.
it is. It can be, but I'm kind of used to that. And so it's gravy for me if I get with a group.
I get it. I get it. So I'm curious, like so much wisdom here. And, You've shared so much with each one of these questions we've asked you. So thank you so much for just being such an open book and sharing, sharing all of this. Like your racing has, I mean, I can't even imagine barreling down a hill in a wheelchair, head down at those kind of speeds. How has facing those moments of courage transitioned to other opportunities and other events in your life where you've been faced with something that's you're a little scared to do, maybe that first time? How has pushing yourself in the chair on the race course transitioned to difficult moments in your life off the race course?
Yeah, I think for the racing, it's been more about excitement to meet the challenge as opposed to any fear related to it. You always have some imposter syndrome going if you belong and some of that stuff, and you can get over that pretty quick. Thankfully, with the friends that I had. But I think the main thing just from wheelchair life is problem solving is something that is just ingrained into everything I do. Like I have to hang a picture on the wall. How am I going to do that? I'm in a wheelchair. I have to pour myself a glass of milk and the weight of the gallon will throw my balance off. So what do I do about it? And it's these everyday things that it's just a problem solving thing. So how do I get out of my day chair and into my racing chair? It's just a problem that needs solved. There's all sorts of those things. And once I'm in the chair and moving, that's just fine, right? But there's a lot of things that I tend to think I'm unstoppable in that, fine, there isn't a place for me to park. It's okay. I will be just fine. I'm still going to beat you to the door. There's things like that, man, I could be very upset that, at Walmart, there's no handicap spot for me. And I see somebody walking out and whatever. I don't let it bother me. I'm like, yeah, whatever. But there's things that way that it's just another challenge and another problem to solve. And most of them are so simple. If you don't dig your heels in first, like we were talking about earlier, I mean, you can complain about it or just go. As an example, I tend to be really, really fast in the grocery store because I will throw everything in my lap. I'll zip around, I load the cart up and go get the next bunch while the family's holding the list and they're still in the freezer aisle. I'm zipping around and getting everything and get out of there, and it's just part of life. So it's not really a fear thing. Thinking of some of the fear stuff, the first time flying had nothing to do with flying in a wheelchair. It had to do with without knowing what and how they would manage me being in a wheelchair. I didn't care about flying. I've done that a million miles, right? But what are they going to do with my chair? Is my chair going to come back in one piece? I've had wheelchair wheel broken when it arrived at me coming off the plane. So how do you get home? It's that sort of stuff that you have to keep pushing through it, and it's less about fear and more about attacking the problem and come up with a resolution.
What problem are you still trying to figure out then?
Oh boy, how to be a better parent. My youngest is 17, and they don't want you around. They don't need you around, they think, right? Except when they're hungry, but I probably should spend less time on trying to solve that problem or win that challenge and just be more present with being. And, as a parent, you want so much for your kids. You just express that with your second grader, but sometimes it's not what they want. And so to find a way to, especially as, she's on the cusp, she'll be a senior next year. She'll be having to make some choices as to what she plans to do. And it's a challenge for me to understand that that's not my choice. I have to be supportive through that. And so I know I could do a lot better that way. And I think that equates to being a lot better for the entire family if I can continue to try to get better at that.
I love that. It's not easy, is it?
No, every day there's something.
Especially men. Like, we don't often talk about the challenges of parenting, and it's not easy. Like, it's wonderful. It's extraordinarily rewarding. I wouldn't trade it for all the money in the world, but it's very hard to sit in a moment with your child that you would want something different and just allow it to be without trying to fix it or change it for anyone you love, like for just men in general. Like I kind of just want to fix all your problems and tell you how to solve them. And, like
bulldoze.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen the video? It's a husband and wife talking. It's called "It's Not About the Nail." on YouTube. Have you seen this?
No, I'll look it up.
Yeah, you got to look it up. It's the wife has literally a nail in her head, and it's obviously it's not actually
Yeah,
like
yeah,
but it's all about she's trying to talk about this problem, the nail,
yeah,
and he's trying to solve it the whole time. And it's evident that this conversation's happened a whole lot of times,
yeah.
and he keeps trying to fix it. And she's like, I just want to talk about my problem. I want to talk about the nail.
Don't
I
fix
don't
it.
need to
Yeah,
fix it. Don't fix
that,
it. I just want to talk about it.
that's
And you
great.
can see him struggling to
Great.
just sit in that moment. It's
Yeah,
hard.
it is. And the thing with my daughter, and she's my third, right? So she's my youngest and my third. Would you please just take breakfast? Please. How do you start the day without any food in your stomach? I'm not hungry. I'm like, oh, but you're going to be in an hour. Can you please trust my wisdom that you need some food in your stomach, right?
So my oldest is crazy brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's times it feels like I'm raising an adult, like legitimately an adult. And she'll ask me questions, like she'll be checking my work. And that's a real opportunity for me to grow.
Yeah.
Cause I'm like, please stop.
Yeah.
Like you are, we're good. Like you don't need to check my work, right? Like exhale and be a kid,
Mm-hmm.
And with all of our children, with all of those leadership opportunities, whether they're our kids or employees, it's understanding and meeting people where they are so often. It's being okay meeting people where they are, not measuring. It's taking your principle and flipping it, right? This idea that measuring ourselves against ourselves, and then also making sure we aren't taking our yardstick and laying it against them and saying you need to be here, giving them permission to do the same thing,
Yeah.
which is not easy.
You can want for them, and that's a lot different than commanding it.
So true. So true. So goodness, Dean, I could talk to you for hours, man. You'll have to share with us your bid if you did, so
Yeah.
we can watch you this fall. I'd kind of had checked out last with COVID, with racing, with the injury I've got. I kind of had checked out because I know this is going to be an interesting year. My wife and I are expecting number 4 in October, so
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can beg for the permission slip to train for a marathon and give that a go and see if that can fit in, slip that in. But I hadn't paid attention to what Boston had done, so that's exciting. So they're doing it in October. Is that when it is?
They are, and I'm gonna probably do something I probably shouldn't do, but Chicago is on a Sunday, October, whatever that Sunday is.
Are you going to go back to back?
Yeah. So so Chicago is that Sunday and Boston's the Monday. So it's like the 12th and the 13th or something like that of October. And then Des Moines has a half that next Saturday or Sunday. So I'm going to do the 3 in the week. But again, the wheelchair is different. So think about Chicago for a second. We start at, let's say, 7:30. We're in the cool down tent at 9:30. So first of all, we're not running, right? And in fact, I remember being in Boston in the hotel, getting out of the shower and looking down, and people are still finishing the race. I'm like, what's taking you so long, right? I mean, it's what it is. But no, we'll be done, and more than likely able to hop on a plane early afternoon, get to Boston, attend the wheelchair meeting that night, and race in the morning. But it'll be fun, and I won't be the only one doing it. And I say that in that I just registered for Boston this morning. We'll find out, a week or two if I get in. If I get in, then yeah, why not? Let's just go for it.
I love it.
Yep.
Well, Dean, thank you so much
Yeah,
for your wisdom. Really appreciate you sharing your story, what you've learned through this journey. We'll make sure to link the TED Talk to the show notes. Is there any other ways that people can connect with you other than the TED Talk? Are you on social media, Instagram, anything like that if people want to connect with you?
Best one's LinkedIn, or you can find me on Facebook as well. I enjoy the discussion, conversation, and it's selfish because it helps me keep perspective and it helps me be better as well. So by all means, if there's folks that want to reach out, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the greatest processes and gifts we can have is to pay it forward to somebody else who's in this journey in their own place. So I just want to thank you for that. Again, this has been an incredible conversation, so much wisdom, so much impact. So I've got one last question for you before we let you go. What does legacy on purpose mean to you?
I think that there's just a lot of being intentional about everything. So, we've talked about being present. We've talked about what you learn. I don't do well with randomness, being in the wheelchair. If things come out of left field and I'm not ready to react to them, it can really throw things for a loop. And so being very intentional about what I'm doing is is what I think helps me build, if you want to call it a legacy. So whether it's on purpose or not, for me, there's a reason I'm doing the training. There's a reason I'm doing the marathons. There's a reason I'm doing all those things. And if that culminates to a larger body of work that looks interesting, then to me, that's a bonus. I think it's just a matter of putting it together every day.
I love it. I love it. Dean, thank you so much.
You
Truly
bet.
a gift to spend time with you. And, hopefully they canceled the Indy Mini, but hopefully maybe you and I can join part of it. You kick my butt, but maybe we can do a little running together someday.
Next year, we'll be out there.
I love it. I love it.
Thank
you so much. Well, thank you so much for sticking with us through that incredible conversation. And Dean, I just want to recognize you for one of the things that really resonated with me. There's a lot that did, but one of the things that really connect with me is the ability to know that it's okay to have a day that we're not 100%. That idea that we can have a bad play, but we don't have to have it carry into the next one. And instead of thinking of it as just one bad play, is to see it, see what happens, learn from it, but don't carry it into the next one. Dean, thank you so much for that. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for leading a tremendous example to know that the only person that we need to measure ourselves against is the best version of ourselves that we can be. So thank you for sharing that wisdom. Really beautiful stuff. Thank you again, folks, for being with us. This was so much fun. It is such a joy for me to be able to share these individuals with you each and every week. And it's because you tune in and you share this on social media. You share this with your friends on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. So please keep doing that. We thank you for that. I see it. I recognize it. And I thank you for each one of you who's doing that. So please, if this resonated with you, please share it with your friends. And till we meet again next week, go out and live your legacy on purpose.